Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Mr. Wiz here. If you are new to this channel, we build video games. So right now we have been working our way through Unity, and most recently we've been learning a lot of really cool effects to improve the scenes that we've been creating. So I've been creating this scene with a car driving around this world, and we built it all really, except the trees were downloaded and the rocks were downloaded, but the world was built by me, right? So most recently, we added things like sound effects to our world, and then in the last video, we added light effects, where I put headlights on my car, and I also put a light on a building, and we were learning about the different types of ways to do that. So we've just been really focusing on these last couple videos on visual effects, sound effects, things of that nature. Today, we're looking at special effects, particularly the ones that come from particle systems. Let me tell you guys something. Particle systems are awesome. So awesome. When you get good at them, there is almost no limit to what you can do. It's incredible. And now I will tell you, I will be honest, I myself am not a master at particle systems. The things I've been able to do with them are impressive and they're fun, but I've seen some people go way beyond what my capabilities, right? So this is a beginner introduction to particle systems, today's lesson. If you like it and you want to dive deeper, I would highly encourage you to do so, because there's so much you can do with particle systems. So specifically what we're going to do today is we're going to build a campfire, and we're going to have some fun with that. So I'm going to put mine kind of in front of my car, since the car is the player. Let me use my WASD tricks to fly around here. I'm going to put my campfire over here so that I can see it as soon as the game loads, and I can kind of see what it looks like. So I would encourage you to follow along with me as best as you can. You can always pause the video if you need to. So I'm going to create an empty object, which I'm going to call campfire. Now remember, when you're creating objects, you can either right-click on the empty part of your hierarchy, but if you don't have an empty part of your hierarchy, you can also do it by clicking on the plus sign up here in the hierarchy window. So if I click on that, I'm going to create an empty, and I'm going to call this empty object campfire. Now, if you don't want to build a campfire in your world, you can use the same steps that I'm doing to build something like a torch, right? Maybe you're doing an old medieval village and you want to put some torches on the side of a castle or something like that. You could do that if you want to. Maybe you want to do something like a candle and you just want to make a small fire, a little flame at the top of your candle. Feel free to do that, right? So think about how you want to build your fire. But once you decide how you want to use it, either create the object like I am, or go find the object that's already in your world so that you can add it to it. So before I build my fire, I am going to build a small little campfire here, and I'm just going to give it a couple cylinders that are going to act like pieces of logs, basically. This is just going to be the logs for my fire, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. Let's change the scale so they're a little skinnier. Oop, too much. Oh, that's pretty good. Right about there, maybe. Yep, okay. And I'll give it a quick brown material. Oh, I already have one for bark. We'll use that. There we go. And I will duplicate this using Control D to make a second one, which I will rotate. And let's do Control D again, make another one, and I'll rotate it that way. Okay, so I've got my logs, which I'm going to put my fire on. And yeah, let's get started. So to add my particle system, it's going to be very simple. I'm creating it as a child of this campfire object. So I'm going to right click on the word campfire, and down here where I would normally create a 3D object or light or sound, like we've already learned, there's a section that says effects. I'm going to go to effects, and there are different types of effects, but the one we're focusing on today is particle system. So I'm creating a particle system as a child object of the campfire. And I'm going to call this particle system fire, just so I know what it is. So immediately you're going to see we got some weird stuff happening here. Those white dots that you're seeing, those are the particles. And you can see they're kind of floating away in that little manner there. We've got this blue cone shape, and they're drifting away in the distance. So particle systems are special effects that are built around this idea of particles. So what are particles? Particles are individual objects that you use in large quantities usually to create a special effect. So we're going to turn these little glowing white dots into something that actually is going to look like a fire, or at least that's the plan. And I think we're going to be successful at doing that. So the first thing I'm noticing is that the way that this is moving is not the way I want my fire to move. It's all going to the side. I want my fire to go up, right? So I'm going to go ahead and rotate this using my rotation tool. I'm going to rotate it upward. All right. I'm just going to go ahead. Looks like it's right now it's at negative 94, so I'm just going to round that to negative 90. I like to use those round numbers and intervals of 90. All right. So now I've got it moving the right way, but it looks nothing like fire. It just looks like a bunch of white dots going up into space. So we are going to change a bunch about this. So what I want you to notice over here where it says particle system, actually, before I get to that, I want you to notice on my screen, there's this pause, restart, stop. You guys see that? Particles, while you're editing them, I suggest you let it play. You could pause this while you're editing it, but if you're going to make particles, it's really, really helpful to immediately see how the changes you're making affects the way it looks, right? So that allows you to edit in real time. So I like to let them play. That way, as I make changes, I can immediately tell if those changes are something that I like or dislike, right? So over here in our particle system, there are so many stats here. Oh my goodness. There are so many stats you can change with particles, which is why I said earlier, if you get really good at it, you can do almost anything. I'm going to focus on some of the simpler ideas, right? Some of the basic stuff that you might find useful. So here at the beginning, we've got duration. This one's not particularly important to what we're doing. We have looping. So this one's helpful. Do you want your special effect to be on a loop, or do you only want it to happen, every once in a while? For what we're doing, we are going to keep it looping. Now, later on, once you start learning how to code and all that, you might not want it to loop. You might want it to only happen once when a certain trigger affects, right? Pre-warm. Pre-warm is interesting. So basically, here's how this works. Pre-warm acts as if the special effect was already happening before the player started the game. So here's what I mean by that. We're making a campfire. If we do not pre-warm, the campfire will be created when the game starts. But if we do pre-warm, when the game starts, the fire will already be burning. There will already be smoke. It'll act like the fire was going before we got there. Okay? That's the big difference. Pre-warming means it acts as if it was already happening before the program starts. And we'll look at that more closely, so you'll see what I'm talking about soon. All right, start delay. Do you want there to be a pause before it starts or not? That's really what that's all about, right? Start lifetime. Now, this one's important. As I mentioned, particle systems are made up of all these little particles. Start lifetime is deciding how long each particle will stay alive. Right now, each particle stays alive for 5 seconds. So as they get created down here at the bottom of my fire, they're floating into space, and after 5 seconds, they die. And that's why they're all dying right around the same spot up here. So changing the lifetime of my particles is going to be very important because it really decides how big my effect is. Also, we have a start speed. How fast are they moving? So changing either the speed or the lifetime will affect the size. So if I change the lifetime, let's say, to 1, my effect just became a whole lot smaller, right? But if I increase the speed to 10, they're moving faster and it gets bigger. So you got to think about those things. For a fire, I probably do want it to have a fairly good speed, but I don't want it to have a lot of lifetime. So if I'm going to keep it small, if I want to keep it down here, I'm going to have to make a much shorter lifetime. What about 0.1? What does that look like? Ooh, that might be too small. 0.5? What does 0.5 look like? That's too big. So you guys are going to have to play around with yours a lot to figure out what looks good. I'm going to start with 0.2, but I might change that. And my speed might be faster than I actually want. Let's go back to 5 as the speed. No, that's too slow. Let's do 7. I'm trying to go for realism here, right? So I'm trying to think about how fast an actual fire might flicker. So that's not bad. All right, let's keep going. Start size. So this is the size of each particle, okay? Right now, my particles are large, which isn't going to look very good probably with a fire. So I might need to start off with a smaller size. What about 0.2? Maybe. 0.3, perhaps. We'll start there for now. All right, start color. So this just shows us what color it's going to start as. Do I want my fire to start red? Do I want my fire to start orange? I can kind of play around with that. So a lot of stats, as I mentioned. All right, we're going to keep going. I'm not worried about the gravity stuff, at least not for fire. You can build particles that have gravity, that have colliders, that have interesting things. For instance, you can build snow with particle systems, and you can have the snow actually land on things. So if it landed on one of these rocks, it would sit there on top of the rock. Pretty crazy, right? So yeah, there is some crazy stuff you can do with this that we will not be doing right now. Anything else here that I'm worried about? Max particles. So max particles is interesting. For the size of my program right now, it doesn't look like it makes much difference. But because I don't have a lot of particles on the screen right now. But let's imagine I had a much bigger lifetime. Let's do the 10 again. Right? So here's all the particles that are on the screen. If I changed the max particles to, let's say I just changed it to 10, there's a lot less particles on the screen now because it creates 10 of them and then it realizes, oh, I'm at my max. So it's not going to create any more until those 10 particles get destroyed. So once they reach the end of their life, then it's going to build 10 more, right? So max particles just limits how many can be on the screen at a time. If I'm doing a small effect, then it's probably not going to make that big of a difference. But if I'm doing a really big effect, then I might need to be careful with my max particles and make sure I have enough. The important thing for me, since I have an effect that's looping, is I need to make sure there's no pauses in my creation. I don't want there to be any times when it runs out of particles and then it has dead air before it creates more particles, right? So having the max large enough that that doesn't happen is going to be helpful to me. 1000, the default size, is absolutely good for now. I don't need to change that, but I'll keep an eye on it later. Okay, I'm going to change this back to the start size. What did we say, 3 or point? I don't remember what we said for that. The lifetime. It must have been a decimal. 0.3, is that what we said? 0.4. I kind of like 0.4. We'll do 0.4 for now. All right, so I'm going to keep going. Emission. That was just the first one, guys. There's so much you can edit with this stuff. It's crazy. So emission is next. If I click on that, I can see where I can edit emission. So it is checked on right now. You don't have to use all of these settings. You check on the ones that you want to use, and you leave the ones you don't want to use checked off. So emission, rate over time. This is deciding how many particles it's creating each second. So right now, it's creating 10 per second. If I increase this 100 a second, I've got a lot more, right? It's starting to look more like a fire, maybe. What if I did 1000 a second? Whoa, that was probably a little bit too much. That's a bit crazy there. Remember, realism is what we're going for. 200, maybe 300. It's getting close. What about 250? I'm just going to play around with these. And for your fire, of course, you should be playing around with your numbers. You should not be copying mine. The goal is to make it look good, right? So 250 is okay for now. I might change it later. Okay, rate over distance. All right, I'm going to pause on the fire idea real quick. Let's talk about rate over distance. So right now, it's creating 250 particles per second because I have it using rate over time. I'm going to set this to 0 real quick here. So now it's not creating any particles. Let's say instead of rate over time, I did rate over distance. I'm going to do 100 for rate over distance. Look at my particles. There's none there. It's not making any particles. It's not making any particles because I have 0 over time. But what's this rate over distance do? Watch carefully. If I grab the campfire object, and actually, now let's just do it with the fire. If I grab my particle, and I suddenly decide to move it, it just created particles. It's creating particles. If I move it slowly, it doesn't create as many. If I move it fast, it creates a bunch. Do you see that? Rate over distance. I'm going to put it back. Control Z a couple times till I get it back to there. Okay. Rate over distance means the particles only form when the object is moving. So what's the scenario where you might want particles that only form when an object moves? Think about it. There's a lot of scenarios. I'll give you a few examples. So one of the ways that I use rate over distance is for the muffler on a car, right? Where the exhaust comes out, where the smoke comes out. Let's say I'm building a game with a race car or a pickup truck that's kicking up a lot of smoke out of this muffler. I can use this, rate over distance, and the smoke won't come out if the car is parked. But if I'm driving the car, then smoke comes out. And if I drive the car really fast, more smoke comes out than if I'm driving it really slow. That's a great example of rate over distance. You can do it for other things too. Maybe you're building a game where you're a water skier and you're on top of the water and you're zooming around, or you got jet skis on the water. As you're moving, it's kicking up water behind you as a particle effect. And if you use rate over distance, it splashes more water when you're moving faster and less water when you're moving slowly. You do the same thing with snow if you're building a snowboarding game or something of that nature, right? You can kick up snow as you're moving, and if you're moving less or less fast, you're kicking up less snow than if you're moving more quickly. So rate over distance is really cool for special effects that you only want to happen when it's moving, right? So we're not doing that for the fire, but you could totally do that for your car. You know, you could totally make one that comes out of the muffler there, kicks up some smoke for the muffler. All right, 100, what did you say, 250, is that what we decided on? That's really fast. We'll change it some more when we edit it some more. Okay, so we're going to go down here to shape now. So on shape, this is where you can decide the shape of your particles. I'm sorry, not the particles. The shape of what do I call this? I guess it's the shape of the particle system. So it's not the shape of the particles, it's the shape of the system. Basically, what is creating the particles, right? So right now, we are using this cone shape, and that's going to work pretty good for a fire. But there are other options. If you did sphere particles, they're now moving in all directions. Like a circle. They're shooting out in all possible directions. If I did the hemisphere, which is kind of fun, the hemisphere is half of a sphere. So now they're shooting out in all directions up atop, but they're not shooting out in any direction down below, right? So that's kind of fun. The hemisphere shape works pretty good for certain things. The cone shape is what we're going to be doing with our fire because it looks more fire-like. But there are other shapes. There's donut shapes. I've never used the donut shape, and I don't really know when I would, but it's creating them in this aura, this circular donut shape. The box one I have used before. So box works really good if you want your effect to just come from a general area. So I will use the box shape sometimes if I'm creating fog on my map, and I want the fog to just come from the edge of the map. What I'll do is I'll create a really long box. So I'll create a really long box across the edge of the map, and then the fog will come from that. So that works really good. You can also use it if you're making things like snow or rain. You can put a box up above the player, up above the world, and have the rain or snow come out of it going down. So yeah, boxes work well for a lot of different things. And then there's other things here where you can have it tied to an object that already exists. So maybe it's coming from the mesh of an object that you already have. So I'm going to stick to cone. Here I can adjust the angle. So that's going to affect the shape of our fire. So it was 25 before. 10 looks pretty decent. The radius, this is the size of the base. So right now, my little logs there are not very big. This fire is way bigger than my logs. So let's give it a much smaller radius. All right, now it's at 1. Let's try 0.2 maybe. Oh, that's not bad. 0.2, maybe 0.3. That looks pretty good too. it's already starting to look more like a fire, isn't it? So yeah, not bad, not bad. All right, radius thickness, I don't really mess with that. Arc, I don't recommend messing with this, but just in case you're curious what it does, let me show you. If I look down on my cone, cones are circular from a certain angle, right? So if 360 is a full circle. If I went with 180, which is half a circle, I would end up with only half of the fire working and the other half not working. Kind of a weird look, but you could totally do that, right? So if you had something that wasn't really a full cone, but was partially coned, you can change that. So I'm going to leave it at 360, but I just wanted you to see that in case you ever decided to mess around with that. Okay, so I'm not really worried about the rest of this, so we'll move on. I can close shape, by the way, by just clicking on it. So I do have it checked on still. I'm just moving on. Velocity over lifetime, I'm not worried about. Most of the stuff I'm not worried about. Color over lifetime. This is where it's going to be really helpful in making our fire actually look like a fire. So color over lifetime, I'm going to turn that on. This allows it to change colors while it's alive. Right now is this orangish, yellowish color, but a real fire kind of changes colors as it goes. So we're going to click on the color option. And right now it's set to blend classic. We're going to leave it that way. There are other options, but we're going to leave it to blend classic. And what we can do is we can pick a starting color and an ending color. So my starting color, I think I will keep in that yellowish, maybe even a brighter yellow to start off with. Or I could go with an orangish one. And then for my ending color, I'm going to go with black. Look at how it's already starting to look more like a real fire. But I'm not done yet. Okay, up here at the top, you see those were the two arrows at the bottom. These at the top have to do with the transparency. If I click on this one on the top right, I'm going to change where it says alpha. I'm going to change it to 0. So this is the opacity. This means that as it's changing to black, it's also disappearing. So again, I now have something that's starting to look a lot more like a real fire. Let's actually get into play mode and see it firsthand. So there it is. It's still not perfect, but it's definitely looking fire-like, right? Not bad. We got some more we're going to do, though. Okay, I'm going to go back to color. Color over lifetime is what I'm going back to. Because I have a starting color and I have an ending color, but I feel like I can do better. So here's where we're going to get a little bit fancy with it. We're going to put some other colors in between. So I'm going to change my starting color actually to a bright yellow. Feel free to copy my color spectrum if you want to, because it looks pretty good. So I'm going to start with bright yellow. And then I'm going to decide how far into the life of it do I want to change to more of an orange or a red. And I'm going to click below my color, and it creates a new little arrow there. You see that? So with this new color, I'm going to go from yellow to orange. And then a little ways later, I'm going to go from orange. I'm going to change this one to bright red. Like a fire, right? A bright red fire. And then I'm going to leave it bright red for a little while, and somewhere around here, kind of maybe about halfway or so, we'll change it to a darker red. And then we'll go to the black at the end. So I have it transitioning. Instead of just going from yellow to black, it's going yellow, orange, bright red, dark red, black. So let's see what that looks like. Oh, let me hit play so it goes back to it. Oh, look at that. Does that not look more like an actual fire color? We start really bright. It gets that reddish color, and then it fades to black. All right. Any other stuff here we want to change? Probably not. Most of the rest of the stuff we can kind of ignore for now. Yeah, we'll ignore that. All right, so it's looking pretty good, but I feel like we can still do better. So I'm going to go up to the top again because there's some things I went past that we can spend a little bit more time on. I want you to notice when I'm looking at my fire here, I want you to notice, oh, did it pause? Get back to it. Okay. That it stops, it all stops at the same spot, and also every particle is the same size, right? Sometimes to add realism, you also need to add some randomness. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make some of these stats that I already chose and I liked, I'm going to make them a little bit more random. So lifetime, this is how long each particle survives. Right now they're living 0.4 seconds, and that's what gets them from the base to the top. I'm going to change that. So back the arrow behind this here, I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to choose, instead of constant, to pick a random between two constants. So now I can pick what should the shortest lifetime of one of these be, and what should the longest lifetime be. So instead of doing 0.4, which worked pretty well, let's make my shortest one 0.1, and my longest living one maybe 0.5 or 0.6. Let's see what we like. 0.6 might be too long. Let's see, if I back up, oh, that's actually not that bad. What's 0.5 look like? 0.5 looks pretty good. Maybe instead of 0.1 for the smallest, I could do 0.2. I'm just trying to give it a nice mix of variety here. So some of the particles will end earlier than other particles. That's the big idea, right? So of course, you guys can use whatever numbers you like to, whatever looks good for you. The speed, I can also randomize the speed. So instead of doing a constant of 7, I could have some of these a little bit faster and some of these a little bit slower. 5 to 7 actually looks pretty good. I kind of like that. For start size, we can randomize the start size. Random between two constants. Oh my goodness, look at how good this is already looking. By randomizing the start size, this is what's really creating the realism. So now it doesn't look like individual particles so much anymore, because some of these particles are large and some of these particles are small. So do I want to go with 1 as the maximum here? It looks pretty good. What if I want just a little bit smaller, though? What if I want like a 0.8? I kind of like that. Anything else here I want to randomize? Probably not. I kind of really dig this. So now let's go look at it in person. Oh, guys, it looks so good. That looks so good. Look at that. We've got a campfire. That looks so good. All right, did you notice at the beginning, when I hit play, the fire started? Did you guys see that? Let's look at it again. If I hit play, the fire starts when the program starts. So there it is, and then it starts. That's because I don't have pre-warm turned on. If I turn on pre-warm, the fire will already be burning when we join the game. So let's hit play now. And the fire is already at full blaze. You see that? Pretty cool, pretty cool. So that's where pre-warming really helps. If you want it to look like it was already starting before you started the game, before you got there, you want to pre-warm it. Okay, we're going to do one more thing to this fire. I'm not done with it yet. I want the fire to also have smoke. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a second particle effect on top of this one. So inside the campfire, we're going to right-click. We're going to add another particle effect. And this one is going to be smoke. So we're going to make it much larger coming off of it. And now you guys have already learned the tricks. So you might be able to do some of this without my help. But I'm going to go to color over lifetime. And I want the smoke to start off really dark black. And then I want it to end kind of a gray. And just like before, I do want it to fade out. So for my exit, I'm going to switch it to an alpha of 0. And, oh, looks like I do need to rotate this one again. So I'm doing kind of fast this time because it's a lot of the same stuff we did for the fire. The only real difference is instead of making a short fire, I'm making a large smoke. So I'm doing a lot of the same steps, but with a different look. All right, so let's see. I will pre-warm it because it will look good if the fire smoke's already there. For my lifetime and my speed, I actually kind of like that lifetime. I kind of like that speed too. I can definitely change the starting size though. So let's randomize the starting size. We'll do it from 1 to maybe 5. Oh yeah, look at that. So now it's randomly picking a size between 1 and 5 for each little puff of smoke. That's creating some realism. I think my cone might be too big. So let's go down to the shape. And let's make my cone a little smaller here. We'll do the radius as maybe 0.2, so a more narrow radius. My angle, I don't remember what I did for the fire, but maybe 10. We can try that. Once again, you guys should go with whatever looks good for you. You don't need to go with what I'm doing, right? The goal is to go with realism, and some of you will probably be better at this than I am. Hey, look at that. I got some good-looking smoke. So it starts off dark, and then it goes to a lighter color, and it fades away. And it looks like it's working pretty good. Pretty good. Awesome. I like it. I don't know about you guys, but I like it. Okay, so before I say that my campfire is done, this is where I would add a couple more things to it. So I've got a fire, I've got smoke, everything looks great, but with fire normally comes things like sound and light, right? So what I can do is I can click on the fire particle that I made, which is the flames, and I can go down here to add components, and I can add components to it. So I can add a light component to my flame, and now it's giving off light. So now I just have to decide what type of light. Well, point light makes the most sense because it should be covering a whole area, right? And I can decide what the range of the light should be. I can decide how bright the light should be. I can decide the color of the light. So, for instance, this one should probably be an orange or reddish light because it is a campfire after all. So a light like that would look pretty good, right? Is 10 meters too much? Maybe. So I could lower that down to maybe 5 or 7, whatever I think would look good. 7 seems pretty good. I can change the intensity if I want to, depending on how bright the fire is. Ooh, 2 looks really good. See how it's glowing everything around it now, right? So I did that just by adding it as a component. Oh, I should also turn on shadows. We'll give it soft shadows. Makes sense for a fire to have soft shadows. That looks so good already. Oh my goodness. All right, but is light the only thing a fire would have? Don't fires usually also make sound? Right? So you can go download some fire sounds. The Unity Asset Store has a bunch of sound effects. In fact, before recording this video, I found one specifically for this fire. It's this pack right here, Nature Sounds FX. This was another free pack. I love free packs. This pack has like 4 different fire sounds. It has rain sounds. It has volcano sounds. I think it has water sounds. It has a bunch of sounds that you might hear in a nature setting like what I'm creating, right? And I found it just by doing a search for fire sounds. So lots of cool sound effects in here. There's beach sounds, avalanche sounds, wind sounds. So I could download this. I can pick a fire sound in it, which I was looking at earlier. I think my favorite one is fire number 3. You can listen to them, remember, by clicking on them and then clicking the play button. That sounds like a campfire to me, doesn't it? So I'm going to go back to the fire particle effect, and I'm going to add another component, and I'm going to call this component sound. Oh, I'm sorry, that's wrong. I'm going to add audio source. You can tell I'm trying to wrap up the video because I'm talking too fast. So audio source is the name of the component, and then where it says none, I can drag my clip there, fire number 3, and then I can start making settings to it. I want it to play on awake. I want it to loop. And then in the spatial blend, I want it to be 3D. And I have to set the distance. I think since the light shines 7 meters, maybe the max distance should also be 7 meters on the sound. So you can only hear it if you're close to it. There we go. And now I have a sound effect on my fire, which I'll only hear when I get close to it. Let me unmute my game. So I've got the background music, I got the fire engine. Let's see if I hear the fire. It's a little quiet. I think my music might be too loud, but I can adjust that later. But anyways, my point is I was able to add audio and lights to the particle effect that I made. So this video is long enough. We will stop here. I will make another particle systems video. In the next video, we will use it to create environment effects, like the fog that I mentioned earlier, or possibly rain or snow. We'll do that in the next video, okay? So if you learned something new today, please click that like button. If you're not already subscribed, please subscribe. and I will see you guys next time.